Really?
Well, once we first two questions.
Yeah. This is one of the best interviews that I've done and one of the most important interviews that I've done. If you're a man going through a divorce, a separation, if you have been accused of abusing one of your own children, if you're a father and there's a custody battle at stake, this is going to be one of the best resources that you can have, especially if you live in the United States, even more if you live in Texas, and even more if you live in Travis County, Austin, Texas. But there's a problem with this interview. It's an interview that I did with family law attorney Ryan Dougay. He specializes in criminal cases that have to do with child abuse. He's also a divorce attorney. He's highly, highly recommended, and I can't recommend him enough here in Austin, Texas. But there's a problem with this interview. See, this interview was done on April 26, 2019. It was amazing. It took 2 hours. We created all this media, shot it in 4K, 3-camera shoot. But on April 20th, 2019, I had a hard drive failure. Unfortunately, a lot of that 4K footage was not double backed up. That is my fault and my problem. But thankfully, I still had 100% of the audio. I had 95% of our safety shot of 1080p, which is what you're going to see here in the interview. And in reviewing the content of what we shot, it is vital. This is one of the best interviews I've done. Unfortunately, the video quality is not going to be that good. Unfortunately, you're going to miss those beautiful close-ups of Ryan and myself, but you are going to get all the information that you need to hear in this. Within this, we dispel massive myths that you need to know as a father going into a child custody case. Things that you have to do, things that statistically through proof will help you in your case, and things definitely to watch out for because, man, I hate to say it, the divorce industry is an industry before it's something that's going to help you. And the best thing about this interview is that what we get from Ryan is how to save your relationship with your kids legally. If you do live in Austin, Texas, or in Travis County, he's highly worth the consultation, and you can find his number and website and all that sort of good stuff down below. Lastly, your questions and your comments are highly encouraged here. This is a series that I want to do of talking to lawyers about specific types of cases that you guys have. And because this is a podcast for men, this is a very, very important episode. If you're going through a divorce, if you're running into a criminal trial where you're accused of abuse for your kids, if you're just getting separated and want to make things work out best, listen to this, take notes, ask questions, and of course, get your own attorney. Get on this before it gets on you. Let's get into hearing from Ryan Dougay. Hey, so let's get started.
Sounds good.
All right, Ryan Dougay, you are a family law attorney.
I am.
And how would you title it? Because you do criminal as well as, would you say, is it civil and criminal?
So I do civil family law, and then I have a little niche practice where I just do family violence cases where mainly men, get arrested for family violence, protective orders, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know what that's like. So, I'll get into some of the things that I would want to ask you about stuff that happened to me. But one of the most important things is last May, I posted up a video, which was 5 things fathers should know about child custody or whatever. And I'm not an attorney. That's one of the first things I say. But it's like, find a lawyer, interview multiple lawyers. Don't get angry. Don't communicate with your baby mama and, kick up more drama. And these are just kind of like, layman things to say. But there's so much moxie on that video. I would get emailed almost daily about it. And still, 9 months later, or actually almost a year later, I get emailed minimum once a week about it. And these desperation cases from men saying, look, this and that happened. My baby mama's crazy. Just all emotionally wrapped up in it. And they're like, what do I do? Do you know an attorney in Arizona? And I'm like, hey, man, no. But what is it that a guy, when he is getting a divorce, let's say nothing crazy has happened yet, when he's getting a divorce from a woman, what's the most important thing that he has got to do?
Well, first, I would say the best thing that 2 parents should do is try to work it out on their own.
Yeah.
Because in the long term, one, it's going to cost a ton of money hiring lawyers. If they're going to fight, most of the time, a lot of these fights are just about vengeance.
Yeah.
And you can come to an agreement at the beginning of a case. You can spend $100,000 getting through a complicated, $50,000 to $100,000 getting through a complicated custody case. And at the end of the day, the judge is probably going to rule similar to the way you could have cut a deal in the beginning.
Yeah.
Will you repeat that question again about what if father was?
Yeah.
It,
What should he do? You know, a guy's going through divorce. He has kids. You know.
So the first thing is you need to hire a good, competent attorney that has trial experience and that's a good negotiator.
Yeah.
And the problem with a lot of lawyers, or a lot of problems that men find themselves in, is they'll go hire a lawyer. They may find one off the internet, and you don't know what you're going to get. There's a lot of lazy lawyers out there.
Yeah. There's
a lot of lawyers that will take your money and not do a whole lot. There's a lot of lawyers that will drop the ball. They take too many cases. But the main thing is for a father is to be highly involved in the kid's life and try to get along with the mother. Because the bad thing is when these people get divorced, if they don't get along, it only affects the kids. And they can take their anger out on each other, and they're not hurting each other. They're only hurting these kids.
I just want to clear some things up and jump right into the Shark Tank, because you're talking about some stuff, and I think guys really need to hear about this. But let's start off with the men's rights attorneys or fathers' rights attorneys, because this is what I get from all the guys. And I agree 100% with what you're saying. Nobody ever wants to hear that. No men that I talk to want to say like, hey man, chill out, try and work it out. Like, the most important thing is that you're there for your kids. You do not want to piss off, your baby mama more. You want things to be cool. They're like, no, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to fight. They get all emotional. They feel that will in there, and they're like, I'm going to find the best attorney. One guy posted on one of my boards. He said, some guy was asking about an attorney in Austin, actually, and I put your name on there because you were highly recommended to me. I mean, we just met, but that recommendation carries a lot of weight from who it came from.
Well, thank you.
But the guy mentioned, he said, no, go to your local father's rights, whatever, and ask for the shark. And I was like, man, that may not be the best. That might be a good idea, but that may not be the best idea. What is the issue with that situation?
Okay, so I don't know any father's rights lawyers that are sharks, period. And the layperson's idea of a shark comes off the street, and it could be how they represent themselves on the website. The problem with the father's rights groups, I always think it's kind of, and I'm probably going to make a couple people mad saying this, but it's kind of like, it reminds me of these Republic of Texas people.
Yeah.
Child custody cases are won on facts only. The courts aren't prejudiced towards women. They're not. However, the bulk of the cases, the mother has the primary custody of the child, and the father gets about 47% of the time with the kid.
What do you mean by that? 47%?
Okay, so there's possession schedules set out in the family code, and so the possession schedule, it runs first, third, and fifth weekends, and there's an expanded standard possession schedule where they would get every Thursday night during the school year from the time school is dismissed until school resumes on Friday, and then on the first, third, and fifth, they'll get Thursdays from school to Monday at school. Mm-hmm. So when you run, and then 30 days in the summer, they alternate holidays. And when you run the numbers, it comes out to about 47% of the time.
Wow.
That they get to share with the mother.
Wow.
Father's rights just get these guys fired up, and it's
easy to get fired up.
It's very easy.
Fired up.
Of course,
yeah.
It's very easy to get fired up. I would never. One, I'm not a fan of lawyers. I have a few
self-hating lawyers.
Yeah, I have a few lawyer friends, but it's very emotional. I would never want to be in a lawsuit. I would never want to have to pay a lawyer.
Yeah.
And these guys get so fired up. They think the courts are prejudiced against men, and that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's all fact-based. It's how involved were you in these kids' lives? I get custody for men, and I get it often, but not as much as for women. And it goes to the best interest of the child. And if a father has been the primary caretaker of the child, he's going to get custody of that child, primary custody of the child. And the mother would have the standard visitation schedule, the visitation schedule I just was explaining to you. So it's really fact-based. There are cases that I have where the child is born and the mother just isn't involved and the dad is. And I've got a case right now where the mom goes out with her friends all the time on the weekend. Dad takes care of them. Mom does things in the evening. Dad feeds the kids, bathes the kids, puts the kids to bed. And a lot of times, and this isn't directed against men, but a lot of times, at least growing up for me, my mom did this primary caretaking.
Right.
And my dad worked. And
so at this point, I want to ask you a little bit more on this, but I want to come back to this father's rights attorney thing.
Sure.
Because it's like quicksand, man, in my opinion.
It is.
Just how people just take guys' money. But all those guys who that matters to probably just shut down right now because you're saying that the courts are fair. And I just want to get to make this clear when you're breaking down the math of it. So men get about 46% of the actual time spent with the child. But when it comes to things like alimony, when it comes to things like child support, men are constantly talking about how, like here, for instance, myself in child support cases would walk in and, I don't always have things the most prepared. And that's something that I think guys need to know about is like, how do you prepare? What does the judge care about? He doesn't want to hear how I prepared it. He wants to hear how it's prepared in a legal language, that an attorney could do. But the woman could come in, the mother of my kids could come in and be very emotional and make accusations and so on. And I'm not pissed off about this anymore. But at first it was just like, whoa, they're listening to her. If I then say that's not true, the judge tells me to be quiet. I just saw the whole system is very much listening to her. In my case too, and this is, I hear this all the time with guys, right? Again, for me to be angry about this, there's just actually a conversation in the lobby about being angry. If I get hit, or what did somebody say? They said, if I get hit by a car and I'm angry about it 2 days from now, what good does that do me? But I'm not angry about it, but I can relate when guys tell me this. In my criminal case, people were saying, the CPS worker, would say like, look, we just care about the child. And I was like, hey, look, this is what's going on. I shouldn't have talked to him the way I talked to him because I didn't consult with a lawyer first. Part of it I did, but I just shouldn't have talked to him because it didn't matter.
CPS is a whole nother podcast.
Right. Yeah, but when I talk to the detectives involved, CPS, when I talk to, the judge, when I talk to the prosecutors, when we're trying to make a deal or when my attorneys were, it's just so interesting because it's always like, there's just seemed to be so much power that they had, what I had. And even there was a tandem trial going on at the same time as mine in criminal that very much affected my trial. The judge didn't care. And direct evidence to some of the same things parallel happening to me that was getting demolished in another court case, that would have helped my case a lot. The judge didn't care. I actually got a grand jury trial, which is amazing. I wish I would have been prepared better for that. But it was just so weird, and grand jury isn't like men versus women. It's the way the grand jury, in my opinion, from my understanding, is how it's set up. Is I don't get to ask questions. They just ask questions to me. I don't get a lawyer next to me when they're asking me questions. And there's no cross-examination type thing.
You're talking about on a criminal case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just seemed so one-sided from my angle. And I hear a lot of men talk about that. And so that's where a lot of men are saying the courts are not in their favor?
So sometimes in these custody cases, lawyers may suggest to a client that to get a leg up in a custody case, go file a protective order. Now, there has to be some basis to it.
Sure.
But I do a lot of protective orders, and the courts sometimes hand those things out like candy. And I think it's just to err on the side of caution. And when you have a protective order filed against you and you lose, the man's case is pretty much over at that point.
Yeah.
Because
worst day of my life.
Yeah, because what happens if a protective order gets granted, there's a presumption in the family code that it's not in the best interest of the child that the parents be named joint managing conservators, which gives the mom all the rights to make all important decisions. So if your child needed a heart transplant and it wasn't all that necessary, she just gets to make the executive decision. And the case is made right there. And then child support set, sole managing conservator, your child custody case is pretty much over. Now, I have turned some of those around, but it's not too often that we're able to turn them around, because sometimes there is some basis to it. But a protective order is easy to get. It can just take grabbing someone's wrist.
Yeah. With the protective order thing, what's crazy about this is that so you're saying the courts are fair?
I don't think the judicial system is fair.
Or you're saying that they're not against men?
I say I don't think they're against men.
But what's interesting here is guys who are really into this ideology are basically like, man, there's more men in prison. When you look at domestic violence and stuff like that, or man, I've been attacked by women, and if the cops are called, or if with my kids, it's like, hey, I'm supposed to pick the kids up this weekend. Sorry, it's court ordered that I'm supposed to get them, and she just didn't care. Didn't matter. Cops don't care if it's assumed that she slashed my tires or came at me with a knife or whatever. They're like, get over it. But if I do that, they're all over me,
Yeah, so that's interesting, because a lot of cases I have with protective orders, the wife has actually assaulted the guy, the husband or the dad. And the dad has been the one to call the cops. And then the cops show up, they separate them, they interview both of them separately. And the one who called the cops is the one that actually gets arrested.
Yeah.
So the judicial system, I don't think, is fair, but that has a lot to do with cops.
But see, this is kind of what I want to drive at.
Okay.
Is that because I am in agreement with you so far, but I think that when women retaliate, they're the ones who go for the protective order. When they find out a protective order is available, they go for it. A man may not. And what I see happening now with men who are getting all wound up in this, they're now seeing the answer to get the protective order first, which is not good. It's like that is so, everybody stop that unless it's real danger. When I hear men talk about this, they say, oh man, the mother of my kids parties, or she spanked the kids, or all these things, which could be seen as bad. Like that could be bad. Maybe she did do a violent act on the kids. Maybe the dad did, whatever. You sign that protective order, you are changing your family dynamic.
Absolutely.
And that is crazy. So I forget what mine was, if it was 2 or 3 years, because it ended up being 5. It actually didn't matter. It's the worst day of my life. But when I found out that protective order was honored, and there was no chance unless my attorney was describing, what could happen, but it would be a severe long shot, you are changing the family dynamic.
Absolutely.
That is terrible. And from being on the other end of it, I didn't see my kids for 5 years. I had plenty to bitch about, there's all this stuff. It's gossip, basically. You know, I'm telling you, oh, there was another case going on at the same time. The judge didn't honor it. You know, woe was me. All these people, oh, it's for the kids, it's for the safety of the kids. You know, other prosecutors, CPS, detectives, all this sort of stuff. And you know what, man? It hurts the kids the most.
Absolutely.
Nobody gave a shit about the kids except us in the end. And us in the end, you know, we put a huge black eye on each other. And I'll even say, in my part is that, man, I stayed fighting with her. It was so stupid, so dumb. Like, no matter how bad it was, and there were bad times, probably on both ends. You know, I have a hard time seeing the flaws in myself. But there were stupid things that we did to each other to maintain that fight. And in all of that, who suffered?
The kid is the only one that suffers.
Yeah.
And back to what you're saying right there. And I want to go back to the family rights. I just want to say one thing about that in a minute. Just remind me. But the kids are the only ones that suffer.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people just want to fight out of principle. And I hear more fathers want to fight out of principle than mothers. It's not always the case, but primarily it is. And they just want to drag them down.
Yeah.
And I always tell my clients that principle never wins. And you're engaging in this poor behavior. Yeah. You're sending out all these shitty text messages and emails. And when I was a brand new lawyer, when I was a brand new lawyer, one old school lawyer told me, he said, you know, anytime you ever write a letter over to another lawyer, or your client sends some shitty text message or email to their spouse, they need to write, "Dear Judge, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," because it's all coming in.
Yeah.
And that shows your inability to co-parent.
Yeah.
And I tell my clients, if the other side, whether I'm representing a wife, a husband, mother, father, I always tell them, don't engage. If they send you something, just don't answer it. If it's trying to rile you up, don't do it. And it makes the aggressor upset, but it shows in court that you don't engage in this type of behavior. And one thing the courts look at, there's a case called Holly v. Adams, and it sets out a lot of the factors that the courts look at to determine the best interest of the child. And when a parent can't show that they act in the best interest of the child and are more concerned about themselves and picking a fight, that's not good. And the instigator isn't gonna get it. They're just not. And I've got a case right now against a police officer. He works all the time, works through the night. And nothing against police officers. I love police officers.
Except when they pull you over.
Yeah, but they will fight tooth and nail to go at the spouse. Yeah. And when they can't even they couldn't manage to raise a child full time, but all they want is to go after it's a power play. Yeah. And I see that so much. It's just a power play.
Are you saying that with police officers in general, that they'll fight more, or in this?
No, not necessarily not fight more, but what I see a lot whenever I have cases, I've never represented a police officer. I've always had cases against them. Mm-hmm. And again, nothing bad about police officers, but they usually, in a divorce, they do not want to let go of their pension. And so they're mad about the divorce.
Right.
And then I see them that they don't want to pay. A lot of it comes down to child support.
Yeah.
And they don't want to pay child support. But this isn't just police officers. It's collective. I mean, there's a lot of guys that will come in. And I won't take a case if someone comes in and says, I want a 50-50, because there's not a law that supports a 50-50. We don't have any provision in there. And I can talk more about how people do get 50-50 custody agreements in court or get them ordered. But the next question I ask them when they want a 50-50 is, do you want to pay child support? And the answer is usually no. And I'll say, well, who makes more money? And they usually will make more money. Not all the time, but a lot of times, because the mom is primarily the primary caretaker of the child.
Yeah.
And if it comes down, you can see these things a mile away.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to child support, I'm going to tell them that, you're not going to be happy in the end with me. And I just want to be clear that the law doesn't support it. A lot of judges aren't supportive of it. Well, some are, very few. But it all comes down to who has been the primary caretaker of these children. And that's it. I win more modification. So the first go around in a divorce, men don't usually win. But the cases that I get custody for men, and I probably do about 3 cases a year where the father will get custody. But they've been the primary caretaker. But it's not on the divorce. It's usually on a modification case when the child gets older. And another way that men will get custody is when the moms have a revolving door and they're constantly bringing men in and introducing these men to these children, and then they'll date them for a couple of months, 3 to 6 months, and they're gone. And
that's on so they lose the initial case or get 50-50 custody. And what that means is that they have 50-50 in terms of liability.
No, it would be there's the standard possession schedule that I was telling you about, where it's about 47% of the time, and that's set out in the family code. And then there's 50-50s where a dad will come in and say, I'll ask them what they want. Some will come in and say, I don't want to fight. I just want what I'm entitled to.
Right.
And then some will come in and say, I want a 50-50 and don't want to pay child support. And I'm just going to tell them right off the bat, the law doesn't support it. But however, we can get 50-50s in court, but they're usually in cases where the parents have split up. They have agreed to a 50-50 from the beginning. They're doing it for a while. They do it throughout the divorce. And then at the end, if someone changes their mind and then like the mom says, I want to be primary, the dad says, I want to be primary, but the 50-50 has worked, the courts are going to maintain what the courts call the status quo.
But then on the back end, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years, maybe even 5 years later, the father hires you and he says, hey, there's a revolving door, and that's interesting. So just multiple boyfriends is enough of a, I guess, character flaw or lifestyle flaw? It
is, and there's multiple reasons why. There's a theory it's been around since 1948, and the psychologist John Bowlby came up with it. And it's very interesting. It's called attachment theory. And his hypothesis was during the London bombings where he did these studies, and he was wondering whether a child, when they were separating children from their parents, so the children would live. So he wanted to know whether the children were better off dead or being separated from their parents.
And what year was this done?
1948. And it's evolved.
Wow.
It has evolved significantly since then. However, 20 years later, I believe it was 20 years later, he goes back and he interviews the children that survived, that were separated from their parents. His conclusion was the children were better off dead because of a broken attachment. And so what happens when you have this revolving door, these kids don't know. They enjoy these people. They like them. They develop a relationship. And when you have a revolving door, my uncle had a revolving door. I know what it was like.
Yeah.
Because I would get close to these people, and then they're out of the kid's life, and then a new one comes in. Well, when you take someone out of these kids' life, it's like they lost the person, like they died, and it can be traumatic losing someone like that, and it causes long-term effects on children, and it's not teaching kids really good.
Sure. This is unbelievable. You're saying, and I'm saying this kind of with an odd motivation, because there's so many guys, if you are pissed off and you want to get custody of your kids, this is crazy, because you're saying like, all right, there's multiple battles here. Let's play the smart game. And I'm not, I know your motive is not to like break up families or whatever and,
No, not at all.
gain power in all these ways. But so many men, see, when you're pissed off, you're always right. You want to fight. You're justified to fight in all these ways or whatever. And you especially must see tons of people in that mode. That's terrible. But if you want to win and you want to play the smart game, man, get the custody you get, whatever. And if there is that promiscuity, and just from the psychological information that you gave of how that's harmful, and it would be interesting just to see it, like that the kids were better off dead, or in what ways, or man, if you could play that card, that would be pretty phenomenal.
Well, I'll just tell you, it's kind of an anecdotal story. I'm in the middle of a trial right now that we're in recess on, and we go back in a week or two to finish it. And it's a divorce custody case, and I can't guarantee you that we're going to win. But I have a feeling the way the judge, you can judge, you can look at a judge and kind of tell where they're leaning, and then they stop. Then they start overruling all of your objections, and that's kind of a sign that you're winning. They're sustaining all of theirs. But anyway, the deal is these people have been separated for a year and a half. Mom started out with a protective order against my client. She didn't get it granted. She had him arrested for assault, family violence, got it dismissed, and then she's had a revolving door for the last 12 months. It was her case, so she testified first, and we talked about it. The judge didn't like it. My client has actually been the primary caretaker of these children because mom was more concerned about going out with her friends, having fun, and hanging out with a bunch of dudes. And
man, and you know what's so crazy about that? And this is a separate topic.
Yeah.
We'll move into these separate topics
Sure.
as we go, and that probably don't have to do with the law, but are just kind of like guy talk sort of thing, is that when women get divorced, not all women, of course, not all, but it's like, man, here's my freedom. I'm going to go party. And there is that window of 6 months where that's very common. I wouldn't even say it's a bad thing. It's just a reaction to it. And I feel that female, this is totally separate from your expertise, but female promiscuity is short-lived.
right.
It usually isn't sustained. And then, of course, some people may have some issues or just their prerogative or whatever it is that it does sustain. But God, you're just saying 12 months of that.
12 months of it. And
is enough to have a judge overlook the potential of violence, or because did you say there was a charge or a claim, or?
Yeah. So look, if there's family violence and it didn't happen towards the kid or in front of the kid.
Wow.
The kid wasn't injured in that deal.
Wow.
And so those are the ones that I've flipped around when I have been able to flip them around. And that doesn't happen very often. But when you can, it doesn't go necessarily back to the family violence. It goes to the best interest of the kid. Some judges just don't. This sounds bad, but some just aren't that concerned about family violence. They may grant a protective order.
Right.
But when it comes to
I
the
can
kids,
see why not, because it's so overplayed.
It's way overplayed.
I mean, and again, people with the whole family violence thing, you are putting your family in such a, I mean, I know you want to be right. I know you're pissed off. I know God, man, that stuff's going to last.
Yeah.
And your fight isn't going to last. Your fight's going to be over in 2 weeks. It's going to last for a long time.
That's right. Now, on the revolving door, and I'll just leave it at this unless you have more questions about it, but I always suggest, and I've heard it from judges, and we deal a lot in psychology because we have child custody evaluations, we do psychological evaluations,
right.
We have psychologists come in to make recommendations. The suggestion, and some may disagree if professionals are listening to me, but there's a good rule of thumb. Don't introduce the child to a significant other until you've been dating for 6 months. Because at 4 to 6 months, you kind of have an idea of whether you may be in love at that time, but you kind of have an idea of whether it's going to work, whether you really want to be with this person. And after 6 months, introduce them to the mm-hmm. kid, but not on your second, third, fourth date.
Well, this is a phenomenal thing you bring up, and I know you're not saying this for well, you are saying this, I guess, for parenting, but it's just kind of a side note, is that guys ask that a lot. They get divorced and they're like, when do I, it happens all the time on my boards, well, when should I introduce the kids to her? And there's all sorts of different opinions, but it's one, even from a legal standpoint, that if you do this too much, it could get you in trouble. And here's something I want to ask you, because this also happens, even if it isn't promiscuity. What if the woman moves around a lot? Because
that's a huge deal.
Yeah,
because it affects the stability of the kid.
Yeah,
I just modified. I had a trial about 3-4 weeks ago, and I got dad custody because the mom just couldn't get the kid to school on time.
Yeah, man. Oh, geez,
and
God.
Sometimes would be late picking up the kid to the point where the school had to actually call the parent and say, "Hey, you coming?"
Yeah.
And we won custody on that just for school.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
So school's a big deal. Education's a big deal. Stability, moving around, and the boyfriend thing. I don't see a lot of guys. Actually, I don't know if I ever see it at all, that have a revolving door. Yeah. But I see it more in moms.
Yeah, and I think it's just, and again, so many guys are so primed to be pissed off at women. It's part of the differences of men and women. And again, this may not be all women, but I feel it's very common. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be the rest of her life. It doesn't mean that she should be shamed for it and whatever. But what I am saying is, guys, if you are set out for blood in a court case and you're not going to win the first time, what you brought up is a really interesting point. Another thing that I just want to clarify on it, which is also interesting, because as a man, let's say you get a domestic violence case against you, you feel beaten down by the system. You don't feel confident. I never felt, and this is my own problem, it's my own fault, I never felt that I had the courts on my side when I went to go meet with my attorney or show up or go in and, do your monthly check-in with the judge sort of thing. It's phenomenal what you said. If the child didn't see it, if it didn't happen to the child, but let's say the woman, or you have a past history of domestic violence, it may not be as important as you think. It may not play into the case.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay family violence because it's a big deal.
Definitely.
However, it depends on whether it has affected the child. If it doesn't occur in front of the child, you could get a family violence charge by just saying, I want to whip your ass right now. Right. Or not I want, but it's just a threat. And you can get a protective order, and then you lose custody of your kid. Or not lose custody, but you're stuck with the other party getting all the rights to the child. So... but however, I see a lot of abusers out there, and it's real.
Yes, yeah.
And that's just a totally different ballgame, and they just don't care. And everything is, they blame everything on the spouse. However, I see more bogus protective orders filed against men. Yeah. And that's in there's one lawyer in town, and she's not well respected, but people think she's the go-getter. And she's one of the highest paid lawyers in town. But that's her playbook. Yeah. It's let's go get a protective order first and just screw him over. And get him supervised visits and make his life miserable.
There's something from Williamson County. I'm going to look on Facebook. It's this video going around of, I think, a Williamson County, some sort of legal person. But
is this the federal lawsuit, the RICO lawsuit they filed against a lot of these psychologists?
No, it is, man, I'm going to, give me a second. But,
sure.
But basically what happens is people, you're saying certain lawyers take advantage of the system.
Absolutely.
And in this case, a female lawyer is playing to female clients saying, let's go get a protective order.
Now, I'm not saying it's female lawyers.
In this particular case.
Well, this is just one lawyer in town that's part of her playbook.
Yeah, yeah.
But
then on the flip side, there's
men lawyers do it too, and we just call it trying to get a leg up in the custody case.
Yeah. So there's this. This is it was posted by a guy just shooting in Williamson County, Assistant District Attorney Leslie Levy, and she's criminally coaching. This is what he says. The man who posted this. She's criminally coaching attorneys how to file protective orders one man responds to this. One man responded to this video accusing her of coaching attorneys to commit at least 3 criminal actions. So it's a lot of non-lawyer jargon, but it is an attorney. She's basically talking to, I believe, other attorneys about it. And it's like an hour long.
Okay.
All these men are up in arms about this. So the reason why I bring this up is, obviously we're not going to watch this and you may not be familiar with it, but this is part of the dialogue that men are having, going like, man, holy shit, we're fucked. It's so easy for the system to fuck us. What I think is important about what you're saying, in 2012, I was like, you know what? I told the guy who ran the convention that I was hosting and very involved in, I said, man, I'm going to dedicate my life to men's rights. That lasted about 6 months because what I saw were a bunch of men just blaming things, and they were not go-getters in life. They stayed stagnant. They complained about all this stuff, and to be honest, I learned a different perspective on it. And what I saw was that we have an amazing legal system. We have an awesome legal system. I felt that it didn't work out so well for me. But in that, a lot of that's my fault. Like, a lot of it's my fault for, one, getting myself in the situations for whenever I was in a courtroom. I could have done that better. Could have been smarter. And so in terms of family law, there's stuff I could have changed about my behavior. And number one, not making the mother of my kids so mad.
Yeah.
That is not good. And I just remember when we first started, she didn't want to kill me when she found out she could kill me. And then I pissed her off more. It's like, it's a different story, right? But that wasn't the intention ever. The other thing too, is that the more that you fight, the more you miss the primary purpose. And so many men screw up in this, where they're like, man, I got to fight for my kids. And I've heard guys say, I paid $100,000 to an attorney. And I'm like, what? To get custody, and we're going to get it. And the case wasn't solved yet, And I just think, like, you're getting robbed.
Getting robbed. And this is
how much should a divorce case cost?
That is a big question. That is
right.
A question that just that we don't have an answer for, because you could get, if you come in here with an agreement, or you guys are close to one, all these people come in and say, this is going to be uncontested. Well, I asked, do you have child support? Do you have an agreed possession schedule? Yeah. No, but we'll come to an agreement. Have y'all agreed on child support? No, but I think we'll come to an agreement. So it's a contested case.
Yeah.
A contested case can run anywhere from $20,000, $100,000+.
Yeah.
I don't really see many cases run over $50,000, but that's a pretty expensive case.
That's expensive, and that's one side.
That's one side.
Oh my God.
And I had one in 2012 where the legal fees on that my client paid me, it was around $175,000, and there were over 150 motions filed in that case. Man. And you've got to be careful who you hire, because there are a lot of money hungry lawyers out there that just create more work than that's necessary. But a custody case, here's the way I look at it. No matter who I'm representing, the dad, the mom, and I always tell them, okay, if we're going to end up having a trial, and let's just try to come to an agreement at first. And if we can't do it, let's just streamline it to mediation so we can check mark that box, see if we can't get a good deal. And a lot of times, if we're going to get a 50-50, a lot of times it comes out at mediation.
Yeah.
And then if we don't have a deal at mediation, let's just go ahead and tee it up in trial. I don't like to mess with all this shit in the middle, because the other lawyers can drive up fees, clients can drive up fees. And if you just keep your eye on the ball, then you can keep your fees lower. Like, I could go to trial. Custody cases are expensive.
Yeah.
Yes. At a minimum, I think you're looking at $10,000 at a minimum to go to a one-day trial. And it's just so expensive.
What is the way a guy can cut his costs down the most? Because he's got to hire a good lawyer. If you hire a bad lawyer, what I tell people, and this has happened to me, so you hire a bad lawyer, you are then because you didn't have enough money or whatever. You got a deal. Somebody's doing you a favor.
Yeah.
All this BS. You're then going to have to sell everything you own to get a good lawyer to fix all the stuff that lawyer screwed up.
Oh yeah,
It's terrible.
So it's crazy. You pay for what you get, and I've had to fix so many cases that inexperienced lawyers have messed up. Where inexperienced lawyers have messed my client's case up, have talked them into bad deals. You really want to make sure the lawyer you hire is a trial lawyer that has a reputation for going to trial, that knows how to try a lawsuit, that is really good at child custody.
And one of the things that I see a lot of times in law office is that people lowball their attorney, and it's like, man, you want to get a good deal, you want your money to be spent, but like, God, you lowball an attorney. You want that attorney to be able to do everything that they're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
You don't want to you don't want to start that relationship off bad ever, in my opinion, just from experience, because that guy or girl has got to be able to back you to their full capability.
That's right.
You know, whether that's looking over contracts or going to trial. Can't miss anything.
Yeah, and here's one thing and it applies to both men and women, but here's one thing where people get it wrong. You are better off hiring a more expensive, more experienced attorney than you are hiring a cheaper lawyer. And here's why. The cheaper lawyers usually aren't that experienced.
Yeah.
They usually take a high volume of cases. Never hire a flat fee lawyer. Never, ever hire a flat fee lawyer. But the more experienced lawyers that are a little more expensive, they can get something done in 30 minutes that may take a cheap lawyer an hour and a half to 2 hours to do.
That is very important. I mean, if you hire a cheap attorney, oh man, it's a terrible thing.
Absolutely.
And I guess you don't learn until you really learn. But
yeah, and I think the best way for a man to, and I think the best way for anyone to hire a lawyer is to get a referral from another lawyer. I would not roll the dice on the internet, because anybody can make a good bio, tell you all these great things about themselves, and then you get in there and they're lazy, they're not trial lawyers. There's a lot of criminal defense attorneys that don't do family law but hold themselves out as family law attorneys. I love going up against a criminal defense attorney that doesn't really practice family law.
Yeah, I bet. Man, so let's go to this. Let's go to the men's rights lawyer, the father's rights lawyer. I walk into a lawyer's office, and this kind of ties into picking a good lawyer, because I walk into an attorney's office and I say, hey, I'm going through this custody case. Here's the situation. And I just remember I had multiple attorneys do this, and still I felt I could have hired a better attorney, but they're just looking at me all intensely, and they're like, oh yeah, man, you want a beer? You know, whatever, they're offering all the kindness, all these great generosities. And they go, man, she sounds crazy. Let me tell you, this girl is taking advantage of you. She's manipulating you. They're playing into my emotions, all this stuff. And I'm like, man, finally somebody's on my side.
Yeah.
And they're going like, dude, like, I have a client that does this and that. I've done this. I've accomplished this. We had somebody who did this, ate her alive. You know, she's, totally demolished. We proved that she had mental illness, all these things, because this is what I see guys jump for. She's crazy. She's a whore. She's a bad mother, and I'm a better father. And there's a whole answer to all those things that maybe we'll get to, but they're always going for that. Go for it.
Okay, so on that issue, and you're going to have to remind me, you made 5 points there, and if you can remember them, let's hit them all.
Yeah.
But first of all, the lawyers that hold themselves out as father's rights attorneys, I know several former father's rights attorneys that there's a national law firm that I'm not going to name, but they only represent men. And I know lawyers that have come out of that law firm and hated it because they are told to give these men false expectations and to do exactly what you just said. Now, if if the facts that you just laid out are true, this is where custody cases get expensive. All right. So I think everybody's got a little bit of crazy in them.
Right.
But
especially when you're going through a divorce.
Especially when you're going through a divorce. However, mental illness, there's nothing wrong with mental illness, and the courts aren't prejudiced against it. They just want you to get help. But sometimes we deal with personality disorders a lot, and you can't just take a pill and get rid of a personality disorder. But if they're alleging they're crazy and you want custody, you got to prove it. And so there's one way to do that, and it's to go get a psychological evaluation. So if you're going in there and you're going to allege all those things that you just set out, that is an expensive custody case. And that's where I was telling you they can get up to $50,000+ because you're going to hire a psychologist to do a psychological evaluation. You're looking at about $5,000 there. And judges say, okay, you want her to get one? Well, you're going to get shrunk too. So you're $10,000 in there. We don't do a whole lot with psychological evaluations when it comes to court, but they do help sometimes. If there's a revolving door, I like it. In order for me to prove that, what I typically do, I'll use a deposition to question the witness before we get to trial. And I'll ask them about all these men. Sometimes you got to hire a private investigator to go prove it.
Right.
So you've got crazy there. You've got a revolving door. And then the other thing that in these highly contested cases where you've got bad allegations against the dad, we've got problems on mom's side. These are actually my favorite kind of cases. I like these are fun. Yeah, I love them because they're the real challenge. And so what we'll do is we'll sometimes go hire an expert that will come in, and it's usually a psychologist, and they'll do a child custody evaluation.
Yeah.
And they'll get both of them evaluated. They'll interview collaterals. They'll go interview the teachers. They'll interview friends, and they'll get a taste of they will know who these people are, what kind of parents they are. And at the end,
how expensive is that?
Whoo, man. I would say that starts at about 10 on the low side.
That's it?
On the low side.
For the evaluation?
Just for a psychological evaluation?
No, I'm talking about investigating the lives. And
okay, so a child custody evaluation can start at 10, and that's on the lower end.
But that's excluding your fees.
That's excluding my fees. That's just a retainer. But a lot of the good ones are about $15,000.
Sure.
There was a big case that you may be familiar about. I'm not going to name the name.
Probably not.
That was in the news a lot with a local personality.
Oh, I do know.
Okay.
I actually know some people that may have been interviewed on that case.
Okay.
Yeah, wow.
Well, I know some of the professionals in that case, and their bill was like $175,000. And that was just for the person that did the child custody evaluation.
Was it the man who hired it or the woman who hired it?
So someone will file a motion to get one, or the lawyers will agree to do a custody evaluation, and then you get a court order, and they both agree to do it. The money has to be available.
Basically, I was saying, were they investigating him or her or both?
Oh, when they do when a child custody evaluation has been ordered, they're doing both sides. It's not unilateral. It's both sides.
Yeah. I think in that case, the man could afford it, but he's got a lot of pressure on him.
Oh, well, here's the good thing about that is if it's a divorce and there's community property funds, it just comes out of, it doesn't matter who makes the money. It just comes out of what they would get at the end. Oh, wow. So if they're spending $25,000, $30,000 on a child custody evaluation, that's $25,000, $30,000 that they're not going to get when they walk away from the divorce.
And so, I'm sorry. Did you?
I was just going to say a lot of people will spend their life savings on fighting for custody.
And this is what I don't get, because in that video that I posted, again, a layman, a guy making a YouTube video, there's no experience other than I hear a lot of stories from guys, and I have my own stories. Go down 2 years down the road. Does anybody care? Are you still that mad at each other? You know, I see a lot of stuff resolved by then, and some doesn't. Some doesn't. right? But in my case, 5 years down the road, we're all communicating. That's what matters. So my fighting and her fighting and our whatever caused extra time to be between our kids.
Well, let me ask you this. Did the lawyer egg it on at all?
This lawyer, my lawyer, no. So, but there were other lawyers that I interviewed that were very much like, let's go get her type thing, you know?
Okay. So that makes everyone real comfortable going in because you think, man, I got a shark, I got a fighter.
Yeah.
And they're just giving you unreasonable expectations. And that's the person that's going to run your bill up.
Yep.
And that's the one who's going to really take advantage of you. And then they're going to fire you when they run out of all your money.
And there's another thing that I want to ask you. What happens to a guy when he runs out of money?
He's fucked.
Right. Like, so let's say like, all right, I got to stop paying you, Ryan. What do? You drop the case?
It just depends. You know, it's really hard. You know, when you look at it this way, whenever I go upside down on a case, my wife and I are eating that money because I'm working for free. And nobody wants to work for free.
Yeah.
But there are times when I've had cases, the one I told you about earlier, where it ran like $175,000. I ate that case after about $50,000 because it was just the right thing to do. I did one last year where my client ran out of money, and I couldn't drop the guy. It was just he would have been screwed. There are times where I just can't do it, and I hate withdrawing from clients, but sometimes you just have to do it because nobody can work for free.
But these are things that guys need to think about.
Absolutely.
Like, one, most likely you're going to get what you're going to get. Now, I call that 50-50, but the actual term would be what?
Wait, ask me that question. Say
what
that again.
You're going to get, like you go to court, most likely you're going to get, all right, child support. You're going to get the.
Okay, so if the male has been the primary parent and has primarily raised that child, that's what the court's going to look at. Who's been the primary caretaker of that child? And if it has been the father's going to be named, so it's the long term, it's the exclusive right to designate the primary residence of the child. And that's why we call it primary. So if the dad has been the primary caretaker of the child, he's going to be named primary. And the mother is going to be the one that gets the standard visitation schedule and be the one that pays child support to dad. And it's the opposite, if the mom's been primary, the same goes.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen in the end, most likely, is somebody's getting the standard possession schedule and somebody's getting primary. And you can fight for a year or two, but just use common sense. Get a lawyer that's honest with you and just ask him or her, how do you think this thing is going to shake out? Honestly, tell me. And, see what you can do to make it better. But if the mom has been primary, if you want to spend the money, go for it. But and you know what? Sometimes it's good to go get a second opinion, by even a third opinion. If you're knee deep in your custody case and you start having doubts and you're starting to spend a lot of money, go find another really good lawyer, good reputation, board certified attorney, and get their opinion. Just get them to assess the case. And sometimes that's all it takes.
I'm sorry. Could I get you to repeat that one more time?
Yeah, sure. Let me think about what I said.
Just to get a board certified attorney.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so sometimes when you're knee deep in a case, it's been going on a while, and you're spending all this money. Go get a second opinion. Go interview a board certified attorney. There's a lot of board certified attorneys that aren't great lawyers. I wish I could name some names of some really good ones, but whenever I have a case where I'm trying to tell my client, whether it's a mother or a father, look, I don't like where we're going here. I think I can get you a better deal outside of the courtroom. than I can in the courtroom based on these facts. And I will tell them, I will go try this case, but I don't think we're going to win. I don't give my clients unreasonable expectations.
Right.
And there are times where I'll give them 2 to 3 names of some other really highly qualified attorneys, and I will ask them, please just go consult with them and get a second opinion and come back to me. And I'll even go sit in the consult with you. But I know, and I have done that before.
That's great.
And it's just, sometimes that's what you need to do. Before you go spend your life savings, interview a couple of lawyers. Do not hire the first lawyer you interview, because you've got to have a really good relationship. You got to jive with that attorney.
So this is actually something that I bring up to guys, is like, and again, I don't know. I'm just the guy who's had some experience, but I say, man, interview a lawyer that's young and tenacious, interview a lawyer that's been around for a long time and knows all the judges, and then interview another one just for the hell of it and be able to choose from them. But if you don't interview that combination of, well, I gave you 2 lawyers and then a third, if you don't do that, then you're not on the mark. It's just, and again, stay away from the guy that's going to get you riled up and emotional, or girl, because, man, it's the worst way to handle all of this.
Yeah. I think you need to hire an experienced attorney no matter what. And there are some really good lawyers that have been around a few years, but I would suggest hiring one that's been around at least 8 to 10 years. And that would be the younger lawyer. The best lawyers.
Right. By a younger lawyer, I'm not meaning their first year. They've had, if it's trial, if there could be trial, they have to have trial experience. Yeah. That's a must.
Absolutely. Yeah. They have to have trial experience. Go interview someone that's been around 8 to 10 years. If a lawyer tells you that they are going to do something or get a result, ask them to put it in writing and then run as fast as you can from that guy or that lawyer, because we can't predict anything. But I think, when I think of the best lawyers in Austin, I think about 5 attorneys, and they run about $500 to $550 an hour. We've got a couple lawyers here in our firm that are $550, and they've changed some of the legal landscape across the United States.
Jesus.
But
keep talking. I'm going to switch something here really quick.
You get what you pay for, and some of the better lawyers, not better, some of the top lawyers in this town are pushing, they're 50 plus. They've been around over 20 years. And, when you get up 20 years plus and you're a trial lawyer, you got a lot of experience. You've tried tons of cases in front of these judges. You have an idea what each judge will do. Now, here's the kicker in Travis County versus Williamson County or most other counties. We'll get assigned to court, but that's not our judge. We don't know who our judge is until the day we go to court. So what we have to do is figure out who the judges on the rotation are, which is a quarter. Every quarter they change. And so you could say, okay, well, Judge so-and-so would do this, Judge so-and-so would do this. And there's only 3 district judges on the rotation. And the other judge just doesn't give a shit about your problems, doesn't give a shit about the protective order, stuff like that.
Back to the good lawyer thing. What makes a good lawyer?
Hard work, trying a lot of cases, paying attention to detail, and that's where it gets expensive. I had a guy, I think you saw him walk out of the office earlier. He was questioning me about doing things and not doing things. He didn't want me to do certain things. And I told him I couldn't represent him because he didn't want me to do the things that I needed to do. One of the main complaints he had was trial prep. Well, trial prep costs more than going to trial. Well, the most expensive thing, the reason trials cost so much is the preparation. Right. And he was complaining about the estimate of trial prep. Why do you need to prep this long? I said, I need to prep. If I have an 8-hour trial, I need to prep at least 16 to 20 hours. If it's a complicated child custody case.
That actually seems
well. In my estimate, I have this document that I created not too long ago, and it's an estimation of legal fees, and I'd be happy to send it over to you if anyone ever wants to take a look at it, so they have an idea of what they're looking into. But I have in mind 8 to 40 hours trial prep, and then I give them an estimate of, okay, for every day we're in trial, I'm probably going to spend this amount of time preparing. And I at least at a minimum consider it has to be double the time you're in court. But when I have a one-day trial, I'm prepping on Friday all day, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm 36 hours in prepping for a day and a half, 2-day trial.
How many trials have you done a week?
Man, when I was younger and a newer lawyer, I had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I didn't prep as much as I should have. So I would try a lot. I think if I tried more than 2 highly contested cases in a week, that would be pushing it, because when I'm done with the trial, your adrenaline, or at least my adrenaline, there's no better feeling than coming out of a trial. I love it. And it will fire me up because I think it's fun. But when that adrenaline runs out after that trial, I'm white. There are sometimes when I have a 3-day trial, I'm so wiped out, I may take Thursday and Friday off.
Sure.
It's just
I would
so tired.
expect it, but
so I think it's wise, just if you're going to have a 2-3 day trial, I don't think you need to try another case that week.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd go argue some simple motion, but as far as trying a divorce or custody case.
Man, there's definitely more I want to ask you. It's 5:18. Do you still have time?
Absolutely. You
want to take a bathroom break?
I'll do that. My wife has set a curfew this year. I don't have to be home until 7.
Okay.
So we've got plenty of time.
Cool. Yeah, there's a lot I want to actually talk to you about, but let's take a break.
Yeah, let's do that.
Man.
We're back on?
We're back on. Ryan, this is good, man. This is really good. I guess that's my level here. But, man, there was a well-needed break, and it was good just talking with you a little bit about life outside.
It was good.
So, I think one of the things that I just want to get to is like where the resolve happens. And that's what we're all looking for. I think women get caught in the fight in one way, men get caught in the fight in the other way. We're not hearing, and again, my message is mainly to men. It's like, guys, you need to hear the full story of guys who've gotten past a custody case and what works best. And you have to listen to that wisdom. And a lot of times those guys get caught up in that fight and I got to do this. It's my sense of pride. They tap into all this primal stuff about it. And I think a lot of times they need to cool that down and realize what the big picture is. It's funny. I was talking to a guy who I talk to a lot about spiritual stuff with and just about, am I doing the right thing? I was telling him last night, I said, man, I copped this resentment. I just can't shake it. And, what do you do when that happens? And I was telling him about it. And he goes, hey, man, it sounds like, you're pissed off because somebody else is making a lot of money. They're getting a lot of status. They're getting a lot of these things. And he's like, man, you don't want that. I mean, you might want that. You got to make money. But at the end of the day, he's like, you got 4 kids. And this dude, he told me straight up, he's like, on paper, I'm worth some money. He's like, I just assessed my whole estate and I'm worth $2 million. He's like, and I wish I could have some kids to come home to. I wish I could have people there, and I don't. And I wonder if I sacrificed that for being good for the rest of my life, for building this up. He's like, well, you got to think about that. You got to think about that perspective. It just made me think like guys are missing the entire message. I felt that in my case, man, it sucked. I wrote about this on Facebook right before we recorded this. The worst day of my life was I left my attorney's office. It was right next to I-35. And I rode my bike there that day. He said that I lost they went with a protective order, 2 years minimum. There's really nothing you can do. That you're not going to see your kids. I didn't even know what to say. People talk about this weight of pain coming on you, and this weight of pain came on me. And I went under 35. I just stopped. sat under there with the homeless folks. I just cried. I called everybody in my phone. Nobody picked up. It was just the craziest thing, which usually they pick up,
Yeah.
Usually I got some people that'll talk to me. Nobody picked up the phone. And it was beautiful in the sense that I felt this tremendous amount of pain. Now, most guys sit there and go like, I've had guys say this to me, and they say, oh, well, you lost. You did the wrong thing. And yeah, there's a lot of things that I did wrong in that. Tactically, technically, whatever you want to call it. But at that point, I was angry for about 6 months. I came out of it and I was like, fuck it, man. And focus on my career. I ended up meeting my wife. I ended up having 2 more kids. Ended up building a stable home for my kids when they did get reintegrated in, because it's hard. Here's these kids that you dropped off to school every day, and they don't know you, and they've heard these stories about you, and they knew that a court case happened. They knew that dad, went to jail and took a plea, because that's what happened to me.
Right.
And perhaps we should talk about that too, is the whole plea thing. But I had to be strong, and I don't mean that in some like alpha BS way. I had to know who I was. I had to know what my home was. I had to know what being a dad was. I had to know that when I didn't know what to do, or I remember this, sitting in a car with my kids and not being able to have a conversation with them when I first saw them again, for months actually, and just be like, what do I do? Man, what do I do? Jeez. I had to be strong enough to not react, to not go, man, I need to be angry. Your mom sucks, or whatever BS thing you're going to do, which doesn't help anybody. Guys are missing the story of how that can be made better. And that sucks. So I guess let's just go into the resolution of how you see these things resolving themselves.
Okay, so this isn't going to be a legal answer.
Right.
And we're in Austin, Texas, and people think we're the Republic of Austin, hippie Austin, all touchy-feely. But I meditate.
Yeah.
And some of the worst things that have ever happened to me in my life have turned out to be the best things that have happened to me.
Absolutely.
And so I meditate, and I've done therapy before to deal with things. And I've seen how productive it is and how much it's changed my life. And I will tell people that come in, whether it's a man or a woman, that one, I would highly suggest, this is a tumultuous time of your life. I couldn't imagine going through a divorce. Could not imagine it. I may lose my law license if I went through a divorce, just because I don't know if I could come to work and focus. But I will always suggest that they find a good therapist and see them regularly and meditate.
Yeah.
Because what meditation taught me is just to be able to live right here in the moment and accept. And so I think when people can learn how to live in the moment and accept no matter what is going on in their life, and I know this isn't a legal answer, but it's a solution. And bottom line is we're looking for a solution. The only thing we want in life, and when we have kids, we want the best for our kids, and we want peace. Mm-hmm. And if we can have that, then we've won. And I don't like to use the word win when it comes to family law. I like to use the word prevail. And those are two totally different terms. And a lot of lawyers are really focused on winning. And of course, we all want to win. But the question is, did you prevail? And that's the way you know when you prevail are the best interests of the kids being taken care of. And don't go, we can create, just as human beings, we can go create we're a lot of times our own worst enemies. And creating problems in a divorce, in a custody case, one, you're not helping yourself.
Yeah.
And the progress in your case. But what you're doing is you're really hurting your kids. And you can't take the emotion out of it. I was about to say take the emotion out of it, but you can't. The lawyers, we try to, but sometimes we get caught up in it. But when you're going through something like that, sometimes you just have to let go.
Yeah.
And let the pieces fall into place. And take a step back and ask yourself, am I getting good legal advice? Is my attorney provoking me?
Yeah.
Just ask yourself, is my attorney provoking me?
God.
Because if your attorney is provoking you, you need to go get a second opinion, like I mentioned earlier. And
that is so hard to see. And this is where, so basically, like, let's take the example, because this was very hard for me when I was reintegrated with my kids on how to talk to them when they didn't want to talk to me or didn't know how to. I asked guys in my group, and they gave me all sorts of advice, and it just got me through that day. It just got me through without overreacting or doing something stupid. And perhaps I may have done something stupid, but I did a lot less because I had good people around me. But when you're being provoked, it feels so good.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, you go into an attorney's office and they're telling you, like, let's get her. We're going to save your kids. And that's what's so effed up about all of this. We're saving our kids. That's our intention. Yet we fight. We get more and more pissed off. We smear names of people that are going to be in their lives no matter what.
Yeah, so I said I don't like to use the word win in this business. I like to use the word prevail.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, there's only two winners in a custody case, and those are the lawyers. So you have to keep that in mind. And that is true. It is true. And the more if a lawyer's provoking you, just ask yourself, what's he or she getting out of this?
Yeah.
And there's no reason to be provoked.
Yeah.
You need to be advised, and you need to be advised by lawyers that have experience. And check them out. Check your lawyers out. Ask around. And when you're hiring an attorney, I think you need to interview 3 lawyers. And if you fall in love with the first one, and you feel connected, then go for it. But I think you really need to interview 3 lawyers, and you're going to have to pay 3 consultation fees. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. It really is. And that's kind of the best advice I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Well, sure. And I think you bring it up to a better thing is that, on the legal front, you got to do all the right legal things.
Right.
But on the personal front, you should it's so stressful. Man or woman going through a divorce, like, in a way it should be mandatory that you start focusing on yourself. And especially just think about this, if you're a woman going through a divorce and you go through that time of like 2 months, 6 months, whatever, where you're just playing the field again, learning what it's like to, and marriage can go, it's like you guys stop having sex, you stop, having this attraction, and then all of a sudden you're free and you get that taste of it again, and it's been 10 years or 2 years or whatever it's been. You get a little bit stupid with it. Focus on yourself, because that could bite you in the butt.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take care of yourself, because what the courts are going to look at is they look at stability of the parent. And like I said, I couldn't imagine going through a divorce and losing my wife. But I would have, and if we were involved in a custody case, the best thing I could do for my case would be to take care of myself first, because that's the only way I could establish stability for myself going through such a stressful time.
Sorry, coming from an attorney who's in this business, would you say it's more important to take care of yourself personally or scrounge up the funds to get proper legal representation or good legal representation?
I think they're equally important.
Because for me personally, I would say, like, you could be totally fucked legally, but if you focus on yourself, you can come out on top. I wouldn't recommend it. Right?
Yeah. I think you need both.
Yeah.
But it's so important, because how the hell are you? I see people that come in and take care of themselves. I settled a case last Friday, and my client was in recovery. She had some alcohol issues that were working against us.
Yeah.
And then the dad had some anger issues.
Yeah.
That were working against him. And we were able to come up with a deal. We were close to a 50-50. It wasn't exactly the deal that my client wanted. But based on her substance abuse issues, we could have lost in court. Based on his family violence issues, he could have lost in court. We started out with a protective order. They started out with with a temporary restraining order trying to keep my client away from the kids. So we've got 2 tanks at the line waiting to fire off at each other. So we started out at one little hearing, and in the weeks leading up to the settlement conference we had last week, these 2 people started communicating. They hadn't communicated in 5 years.
Wow.
It gave them peace. They were able to talk about raising these kids. And my client was just able to come around and say, you know what? I think this is going to be okay. This works. And not that it worked. It works out for the kids. And that's what these people have to pay attention to. What works best for the kids? And we were talking about men. I know this is a men's show.
Yeah, sure.
But if you work until 7 o'clock at night and you're leaving the house at 6 in the morning to go to work, your chances of getting custody are slim, or getting what we were calling primary.
Yeah.
And that's having the bulk of the time. Same goes for the other side.
Right.
If I have a surgeon and a female surgeon, she's most likely not going to get custody, because the people that are taking care of those children are the nanny and the dad. I'm not saying surgeons can't get custody, but when you're gone a lot, it's hard. It really is. And it comes down, family law, custody is all fact-based. It really is. It's what's in the best interest of these kids, and that's all these judges care about. I was in a trial years ago, and I can remember a judge saying, we made this trial about the parties, and the second or third day in this trial, the judge said, she stopped the lawyers, and she said, we're in day 2 or day 3 of this trial. I have not heard you mention the child one time. She said, I don't care about you, pointing to the mom, and I don't care about you, pointing to the dad. My only concern is this child. And that's it. It's not about men losing, and it's not about women winning. It's about who has shown in the past, prior to filing this lawsuit, who has been most involved with these kids. And one thing I forgot, you asked a question earlier, and do you mind if I go back to something?
Oh, please.
So one of the things that I always ask parents, or if I'm representing a mom or a dad, and my client, whether it's mom or dad, has been the primary caretaker and the other party's busy with work, whatever, I'll ask them the doctor's name, the dentist's name, what's your relationship like with them? And a lot of times they can't answer the question. What size shoe do they wear?
Yeah.
So if you are a father, go to the doctor's appointments. You're not too busy to do it. But if those are the cases that you can win. If you are going to these doctor's appointments, you've got relationships with these kids. If you want to try to win your custody case, you've got to be involved prior to the filing of the lawsuit. It's not, the time to become involved isn't when you get served with a petition for divorce. It's from the time that child is born, forever. And all of a sudden they want to become involved. Like I mentioned this case I have against the cop. He didn't do shit until we filed the lawsuit.
Yeah. Never
Never went to do anything. And we can win these cases. I'm going to turn this phone off.
No, it's all good.
My wife is texting me. I may be too late. Oh, how'd the blog go?
Still going.
It's still going.
What is the max child support in Texas?
Okay, so here's how child support works in Texas. With one child, it's based on 20. It can get a little complicated,
sure,
but it's pretty black and white. In Texas, if you have one child, the non-custodial parent will pay 20% of their net income. If there's 2 children, it's 25%. 3, 30, 4, 35. It can get up there. Now, if you have another child from another marriage, and say you have one child from another marriage, one child in your current marriage, then instead of 20%, it goes down to 17.5. So if you have dependents from another spouse or baby mama, as we call them, then your support gets reduced.
Isn't it capped, though, at a certain point?
Okay, so Texas? It's capped at $8,500 a month. So if you make $500,000 a year, the cap is as if you only take home $8,500.
Oh, man.
But the kicker is, if you're not really involved in the kid's life and there are exigent circumstances, we can request above guideline child support. Wow. So we can go above and beyond that. I have one client, and he did this by agreement. He has 2 children, and he pays $3,500 a month in child support. And he offered to do that. And that was one of the cleanest divorces that I've ever done.
I know a guy that did that, and he just offered it, and then his wife took him to court. It wasn't that amount. It was actually more, but in another state. And then his wife took him to court and got more.
Really?
So he was all pissed off because he made a really nice offer, in terms of alimony and child support. And
if I was the father and I lived in California or New York, and I had represented dads that came in from California and New York,
yeah,
I would haul ass to Texas as fast as you could, establish residency, and file your divorce case in Texas, because Texas is pretty fair it's pretty fair. It's a fair system to some degree. If you're stuck out in California and New York, you're going to get hammered with alimony. Yeah. Texas is very greedy with it.
Yeah.
They do not like to give it. And we rarely do alimony here.
So if somebody's living in California and they then move to Texas, get a mailing address and establish whatever you need for residency, they can then file divorce even if their spouse lives in California still?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a case a couple years ago where a guy came in from New York, and he had to be here for 6 months before we could file the petition. So we were just counting down the clock. Please, we were just every day. It was like, please don't file in New York. Please don't file in New York. Please don't file in New York. The first day we hit 6 months, we filed it. Case landed in Travis County. And my client would have probably been on the hook for about $3,000 a month in alimony, and it was zero.
Wow, man, that's some advice.
Texas is a divorce-friendly state.
But if you get caught with, what's so amazing to me is if you get caught with something like mushrooms that are a hallucinogen, it's a felony. It
is,
like instantly. So it's just, in that sense, it can be pretty rough.
But not necessarily in Travis County, Texas.
Right. That's true. That's true. So a couple things that I just wanted to also touch base with here, because you're bringing it up, is what I tell guys with child support. And man, it's rough. Like I've gotten behind on child support in mega ways, and yeah, it's not good. And once that happens, it can snowball and all these things. But what I needed to think about was to stop complaining about it, because so many guys want to fight and they're not really in their kids' lives, or they're in their kids' lives in some areas. And just because they don't know their doctor, that's fine. I mean, my wife right now, if you asked me to enroll my kids in school, man, she takes care of all of that. She's amazing, man. That stuff is just like reading another language for me. But when it comes down to it, guys want all this power in terms of custody, but they don't realize that the mom's role is good. I mean, there's so many different dynamics that we're bringing up here, but just in this, I remember a guy told me once, he's like, man, pay your child support. It is the cheapest daycare you will ever pay for.
Oh, yeah.
And it just shifted my perspective, because, daycares are expensive. Having your child around when especially if you're, building a career, man, it's not good for the child. Or you're not going to be able to spend time with them. You're actually not, you fought to get custody so that you don't have to spend time with them. And when you were talking about the popular, iconic guy who was going through some child custody thing, in his life, he doesn't have time to spend time with his kids.
No, but he won custody.
It's crazy.
He won custody on the first go around. And then the second modification, his ex-wife filed a modification suit and chose a jury this time instead of a judge. And he lost. But he comes across as a crazy guy on the air. He's somewhat normal. I think he lost the following a little bit during the trial because he came out and said some of it was an act. But because he was a better parent, and even though the jury ruled against him, the judge kept the possession schedule as it was, as if he was the primary parent. And they can do that. And so basically what she did was she kept she kept the mother on supervised visits. Dad lost. She got sole managing conservatorship with all the exclusive rights to make all the decisions. And the jury got it wrong. And the judge saw that. And as crazy as he may sound on the air, he's a damn good dad.
It's one of those things, though, that guys don't realize. Like, they think, I mean, hey, you're losing. Nobody likes to lose. But what are you really losing? And I think that that's important to understand when you're losing a court case for custody. In 2-3 years, you and her are going to be in a different spot, and you probably won't be as angry. And as you described, the couple that kind of came to a conclusion, and they're like, hey, it's the first time we're talking in 5 years. That's awesome. The more you can get to a place where you stop fighting each other and you both better yourselves, you might better yourselves in different directions, but that's going to be good for your child. And that is what you want. I think that, to me, not in a legal sense, but on a personal level of this whole thing that the legal system's trying to do for you, is like, if both parties can go off and be in their best spot and do what they need to do to get there, that's what's going to make them good parents. And at this time, it's really tough because both of you guys hate each other or whatever. But that, I think, is the best personal lesson that people need to learn while going through a divorce, is that this is going to pass. And
yeah, absolutely. Well, you hope they would get along in 3 years.
Right, but sometimes it doesn't.
But the thing is, and people don't realize this, and I've learned so much about early childhood development just because we use professionals and experts, psychologists, therapists, all that good stuff in these child custody cases, is these kids, they pick up on the stress between the parents.
Oh, yeah.
They don't even have to fight in front of the kids, but just ignore. I've got one case where my client, I represent the mom, and she's doing her best to co-parent, and the dad will not talk to her at exchanges. He sends the kids to the car from his car. He won't get out. He ignores her. The kids pick up on this. Man, these kids are all fucked up. They're messed up. Yeah. And all kids want to see is to see their parents get along. I can remember my parents are still married, and they've got a great marriage, but everyone fights. And I can remember times growing up when I didn't even hear a fight, but I could feel the tension. And I just remember how stressful that made me. Yeah. And they wouldn't have to say anything. These kids are so smart. They pick up on everything. And my suggestion to everyone that comes in these doors is do your best to get along, even if it's just in front of the kids. And you see these parents go talk shit about the other parent to the kid. And that is going to create a really messed up adult.
Yeah. Yeah, and where I see that, this is what's really terrible. So when I started working with guys, it was mainly in the dating realm. And so they would mail me or email me about their lives. And it was just so crazy to see this, because there was this wave of single moms. And I hate this because when you see a problem on the surface, it's easy to make a reaction. But you have to see it all play out to see how it all plays out. And one of the things is these men, let's say they're in their 20s and they're like, my mom, hated my dad, and she
talked all this trash on him. And then later in life, I became friends with my dad. Over and over, I saw this pattern with guys. And then they felt that they hated men. They didn't trust men, but then they realized they were duped by their mom, and it really pissed them off. And what's interesting is now there's all these men's rights guys that say, like, this is how evil women are. What I like to say in this, because ultimately that's stage one for that guy coming to some sort of realization. And ultimately, he's going to have to forgive his mom. He forgave his dad. You know, he grew up from 10 to 18 or whatever. He disliked his dad. Forgives his dad, makes all this peace with it. Then from another age, he's going to forgive his mom and realize that, you know, it's just maybe he gets some life experience and then it all plays out. But people all think this all means something, you know, in the stage when he's 10 and his mom's saying whatever to him because she's pissed off. She didn't put a cork on it, you know. And, you know, I guarantee if dad was around more and mom wasn't, he wouldn't put a cork on it and he would talk his shit. None of that's good. And in this process, we're all going to have problems in life. We're going to have tragedies in life. And it's your job to figure it out. And these tragedies are supposed to happen because they challenge us as human beings. I mean, human nature has never not had extreme things happen to us and us learning to sort it out.
Absolutely.
And I think now we're in a place where we kind of don't have to, where we buy a little bit of extra time with blame and resentment and all this other stuff. And people take and run with it too long and damage themselves. And that's not to say that it's good or, you know, if moms or dads do talk trash on their, oh wait, I gotta restart this. There we go. That moms and dads talk trash on their kids. That's not a good thing. You know, nobody's saying that should be done, but you know, it doesn't mean anything more than it is on a political level. And I think that's where guys are taking it. Guys are taking it like, women have all these rights. The courts are against them. And we're damaged as men. So what does that even mean? You know, what does that mean? How are you going to better yourself from it? I know I went off on a little tear there and it's kind of outside of your box of things, but one thing that you did talk about and is that you're saying one of the things that damages kids most is this revolving door.
Yeah.
In terms of psychology, where do you see, just from your assessment of what the psychologists say, is what happens when kids go through major stress with their parents fighting and whatnot?
Wow. So what happens, and this is just my experience in dealing with psychologists and studying attachment theory, is it goes on, it can carry on throughout your adulthood. And until they deal with it, and like you mentioned, forgiveness, until they work through these issues, they're going to be messed up. And a lot of times and what I see is when I get a client that's pretty messed up, has issues that they never worked through, you look back at their family of origin and there's a similar story with the mom or dad, the grandmother, the great-grandmother, and it's just a repeating cycle.
Yeah.
And until you stop the cycle, you can't fix anything. And, you know, there's always going to be a first mover. But you might have to be the last one.
Yeah.
And recognize it and just have some awareness. And in these nasty custody cases, I think, in my opinion, and it's not every situation, but I think a lot of these parents are putting themselves first, and not their kids. And it's more about the fight than it is the kid. Look, man, if the non-custodial parent in Texas gets 47% of the time, you only need like 3 or 4 more days a month to make it a 50-50. You get a lot of damn time. And you have these people that spend all this money for just 3 extra days. It's not really, in my opinion, it's not really about the time. Now, it's
not what makes a good kid.
No.
You know, that's the thing, is it's not what's going to make your child happy.
Now, I'm not opposed. I do think 50-50s are good. I think if you've shown an ability to act in the best interest of your children, I think it's important that they have the maximum amount of time with both parents. And the law in Texas even states that. But, and here's the other thing about, and it kind of goes to this as well. And I got this from the mouth of a judge, that stop saying my time with my kids. It's not your time with your kids. It's your children's time with you. And stop making it about you and start focusing on your kid, because this isn't your time. And I started looking at that after the judge said it, and it's true. Kids don't know when they're 3, 10, 12, they just look up to a parent. They don't know how batshit crazy some of them may be. They just love them, and they want to spend as much time with them as possible. And so long as you provide a safe and stable environment, you're looking after the best interest of your kids. And while the law doesn't provide for 50-50s in Texas, I'm not sure about other states, 50-50s are good so long as you've got the stability in there. It's good for the kids to maximize their time with both parents. Yeah. And we come to agreements on this all the time.
Yeah, man, I just wish there was more dialogue of this whole thing, because, man, this is the one last legal thing I want to say and just get your take on it, because I remember I walked into my case and, trust my attorney, I mean, he's there to represent me. And the judge is like, hey, we can't delay on this. We wanted another month because there was another trial wrapping up that we thought would have helped ours and so on. And they're like, nope, it's been a year, what's up? And so he's like, do you want to go to trial or not? We got to pay for these experts. It's $2,500 for this guy, $5,000 for this guy, whatever it is, for different experts to come in and help you out. And it's like, man, I can't afford that. He's like, well, if you take a plea, we could get a good plea. This is one of those things which is weird. And my wife was there, and she's like, don't take the plea. Don't take it. You're lying. And I guess right here I'm saying, like,
yeah,
it's like I'm committing a crime, right? And we watched these guys in the courtroom, and there was a guy, he was Hispanic and he couldn't speak English, and he got the state representation and he didn't know what was going on. And we saw him get sentenced, and my wife is just watching this going like, Jesus, man, this is so fucked up. And I got to think that because I've never been in this position before. You've watched this happen, so you know how it works. Walking into that trial day for a parent in all of this, and whatever it is, whether in a criminal case or whatever, you might take a plea, or you're going to trial in a, there's some pressure on you in a trial. It's got to happen where lawyers are like, man, I don't want to work on this trial. I want to get lazy on it. Let's just settle. Let's come to an agreement. And it's not always in the person's best interest. How do you look out for that?
I don't know. That's not how I practice law.
Right.
Getting ready for trial is very tiring. It's 12 hours a day. You don't want to walk in there looking like a dumbass. And I walk in the trials all the time where the other lawyer isn't prepared. And he or she they just look stupid. And the problem is you just don't know who you're going to get. And that's why you get what you pay for. And you've got to really know who your lawyer is. And that's why I suggest interviewing enough lawyers where you have an idea of, you interview enough where you feel comfortable with your lawyer. You don't know if your lawyer is one that prepares or not. You don't know if your lawyer is lazy. Lazy lawyers can talk a good game.
Right.
But you don't know their skill. And there are good lawyers that are great outside the courtroom, but they just don't have the courtroom skill.
Right.
It's law is a calling, and then there's the lawyers that are just naturally gifted. And then there are the ones that went to law school to get rich and became lawyers, and they just don't really like it. And let me tell you, we're not getting rich over here, no matter what people say, especially when you have $3,000 a month student loans you pay back.
Yeah.
But there are the ones that get into it for the wrong reason. And I do believe that I do think law is a calling, and you've got to find a lawyer that loves what he or she does. They absolutely have to love it.
In terms of the criminal justice system, like when I was telling you about, there was a Hispanic guy and he didn't speak English and he did not know what was going on. And he was just like, okay, he came in from the jail. They brought him in, stands in front of the judge. He's just going along with it. And the judge is like, okay, whatever, gives him his sentence or whatever it was. And I just looked at that, and my attorney told me afterwards, he's like, man, there's a lot of innocent people in jail.
Oh, hell yeah.
That just, it's so disheartening to see. But when you look at other countries and their legal systems, we have a great legal system, in my opinion. And, man, it's just so, it's difficult. How do you look at that?
Well, it's awful. And I'm going to go to the criminal aspect, the criminal defense side of it.
Sure.
When I first started out practicing law, I did family law and criminal defense. And I had to quit practicing criminal law because there is such an injustice in the criminal justice system. And you're relying on juries, and judges make bad calls. They keep evidence. They'll let evidence come in that shouldn't come in. And you don't get access to the same discovery process as you do in civil cases. You can go into a criminal case pretty much being blind. I think probably a lot of your viewers or your listeners have heard about Michael Morton over the last couple of years, but the guy spent 25 years of his life in prison for a crime he didn't commit, which was the murder of his wife. It was up in Williamson County, and a judge went to jail who was the former DA at the time. They didn't turn over evidence. The DA at the time the judge lost his law license and went to jail. The DA lost his job because of this. Michael Morton gets out after spending 25 years of his life in prison just because they're tough on crime. And you have these counties that are tough on crime. And I think I think the criminal justice system it should be called the criminal injustice system. And I would carry so much resentment at the system that I just finally had to give up. And I couldn't deal with it. There's so many innocent people in prison. I have nightmares about it, actually. I have nightmares about clients I know that are going through trials where I know they're innocent, and the prospect of knowing that there's a prospect of them going to prison.
It's one of those things too where it's like, man, like, is just a human being. You like, I like to play rough. I like to do stupid things, man. Like, I like to do a lot of stupid things. But once you get in that system, man, it like, you have a lot of leeway out in public. But once you get in the system, you get arrested, you end up in a courtroom, you don't know what's going to happen. Nope. And now it's like, yeah, I like to play rough or careless or whatever, but I'm much more careful now. And I think that's important for people to realize, is that once you get into that criminal justice system, you get on paper, it's not the best thing to be on,
Well, as a lawyer, I've been talking about, if I ever went through a divorce or a custody case, if I went through a divorce and a custody case, family lawyers when they get divorced, they don't go through custody cases because they're smart enough to know how expensive the process is, how it shakes out, and they just come to an agreement on property and custody, usually from the get-go.
That's probably the best advice you got right there. An attorney who works in family law, they rarely go to trial.
They rarely go to trial. They will usually settle their case. Usually the lawyer and the spouse can come up with an agreement on their own without even settling it at mediation. But I don't know of one lawyer in the 11 years I've been practicing law, one family law attorney who has family law attorneys, they like getting married. And so they go through lots of divorces. A couple of the lawyers here at Graham Becker, they've been divorced multiple times, but it's like that all over.
That's common.
All over the state of Texas. But anyway, they'll settle the damn case.
Yeah.
Because we know what judges do. We know how they do property. They know how we do kids. Like I said, I've got a curfew my wife told me I can't work too late anymore, and so for 2009,
we're getting there.
For 2019, I have to be home at 7. You know, do you think I'm going to get custody if I go get a divorce?
Do you have kids?
I don't have kids right now. My wife and I have been trying for a while, but when we do have kids, and if something happened with us, I'm not getting custody, working until 6:30, getting home at 7.
Man, I want to ask you this, and it's 6:30,
okay.
So you got to go.
I know
you got to go, but you had to bust ass to get to where you're at with law. Very hard. It's not easy. A lot of people think lawyers have it easy or whatever. You guys work like maniacs.
It's crazy.
That being said, when you go through, well, first off, what does marriage mean to you? Because you've spoken very highly about your wife just in this. What does that mean to you?
Well, my wife, when she listens to this, she's going to think, well, why don't you do this? Because my wife is an amazing person, and she's the best wife I could ever have. Yeah. There's so much more I could do as a husband. She takes care of me. She does, just like you said earlier, your wife takes care of all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
She does everything. I think marriage means, what it means to me is giving, and I'm learning. And one thing I am learning is I just need to listen and be present. I think that's my wife's biggest complaint is not being present. I come home, I think about work, I get on the computer, I play on my phone, and she wants to talk about work and I don't. And so I tune out. But marriage, it's about sacrifice to me, and I know that's cliche to say, but she sacrifices way more than I do.
Yeah.
And it's just about, I think it's a lot about making the other person feel special and important.
You have kids, that's going to change that game because it just adds so much extra stress. It's insane. I mean, my wife is an animal, man. She's insane. She can do so much, but with kids, look, however you want to do it, people make their own rules on it. She is way more involved than I am with the kids' lives, and I am very involved. You know, like before this, like I was late to this because we had this field trip to a farm. I went with my kids, and we were doing all this stuff together with them, which is great, and most parents can't do that. And it was awesome, but she is just way more involved, and she's working. And so it's just nuts. Imagine that stress, and she feels it more. So it's like, oh, well, the kid's got to enroll in school. I'm like, well, okay, well, what do you do? And she's the one doing it.
I want to go back to your question real quick because you asked me what marriage is to me, but I also would like to address where I see marriages fall apart in this business.
Sure. Yes.
And you mentioned how difficult it will be once we have kids. What I see is they stop focusing on each other. And while I am in the business of divorcing people, I'm not in the business of ripping marriages apart. And oftentimes people will come in and say, I don't want to get a divorce, but we're just not connected. And you can reconnect. And I'll give them a referral to one of the best couples counselor that I know around here that has saved so many marriages, which cost me money. Wow. Because I don't get to work on the case. But it's just reconnecting. And some of the best advice that she's ever given me that she tells my clients is start dating again. Just start dating again. And that will reconnect. But what I see, it's not affairs that I'm seeing. It's not drugs and alcohol, which I see those a lot in divorces. Yeah. But it's just the husband and wife. They get so caught up in the kids, who come number one, but they got to go on dates. They got to pay attention. Yeah. I had a wife that came in and hired me a while back, and she said, I just wish he would come pat me on the ass sometimes when I'm cooking in the kitchen.
I do that. My wife looks at me like, what the fuck? No, but it's interesting because you bring that up. And this is one of the things that we always talk about, and I'll talk to you once we're done about that counselor, because guys in my group are always asking that, especially locally in Austin, like a marriage counselor, like a good one. And it's always a good fit for the couple too. But is the love's always there. If it was there before, you can find it again. But man, you have to go through different paths to find it. And man, it was a big time in my relationship to be able to depend that the love is always there.
Yeah.
It's there at one point, even though you have all this anger and resentment or whatever might be on top of that, but the love's there. You have to be able to find it and get out of the way a lot of the times, which is tough. Easier said than done.
Way easier said than done.
Yeah.
I am my worst enemy.
Oh, yeah.
And I will get in my own way. And I was told that marriage takes work before I got married, and it does. And I could do a way better job. And I consistently try to be the person I want to be as a spouse. But man, not even having kids, it takes work. You spend so much time with the person. You think you can kind of, or I sometimes feel like I can, we can just chill out and we're good. And I don't know if we don't communicate, like, I don't know if that's not good. And my wife wants to be dated, and going on dates is important.
Yeah.
I could lay around the house on the weekends, but different people need different things. And I think it's important to know what the other person needs. And it just kind of goes back to the book, The 4 Love Languages. My wife and I met with a couples counselor before we got married to kind of learn what not to do and what to do. And she suggested that you read the 4 love languages once a year, because she said your love language can change. And I think it's important to understand your spouse's love language.
Man, last question. And I know you could talk a lot about this, but it is 6:35. So you got to wrap it up. How do you manage being a sane person? You're working like 60, 80 hours a week. You're doing trials. You have a marriage. It's a tough thing.
Well, you'd have to take a poll around town to see if that's actually true. But the way I try to remain a sane person is I get up early in the morning, and I get up at 4:35 in the morning, and I'll do some reading, and I'll meditate before my brain starts going crazy. And I meditate for about 20 minutes a day. Yoga has been really good for me, and I'm a cyclist, and I put about 150 miles a week on my bike.
That's crazy.
And like this morning, I get up, meditate, read, do a little work until the sun comes up, go hop on the bike, go on a couple-hour ride. And, I didn't roll in this morning until 10 or 10:30. But the partners here know what it takes in order to be sane. And no one, as long as the work gets done, no one complains. And it's self-care. It goes back to what we were talking about. Whenever someone's going through a divorce, you ask, what's the best advice? I forgot what the question was, but we were talking about self-care.
Yeah, sure.
But to stay sane, I have to focus on taking care of myself first. Because if I can't take care of me, how the hell am I going to take care of you?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And I've got to find joy in life. I'm a lawyer from the time I get here until the time I leave at night. But there's so many lawyers that's who they are. And 5 years into practicing law, I just popped. I was working 80 hours a week. I thought that's what lawyers did. I was an asshole lawyer, and the pressure just built up over a couple of years, and I popped. And I actually transitioned my clients into new lawyers. I helped my staff get new jobs. And I remember one morning I woke up, and I told my wife, I said, we're going to get a U-Haul, and we're shutting this son of a bitch down. And I shut it down for 1 year and learned how to actually take care of myself. I came back. I'm not an asshole lawyer. I get along with everyone, and I'm at peace.
You're killing me, man, because this is the end of, like, you got to go, and you're telling me probably one of the most interesting things personally about yourself. I mean, I know it doesn't have to do with family law. what's the one thing that I mean, I know there's so much that probably went into that.
Yeah.
But to take a year off and then go back and be a lawyer again that's successful, at a high level, what did you do? Like, what advice could you give from that?
I have a very supportive wife that could carry you through that year.
That's crazy, man. And how long ago was that?
It was, let's see, that was 5 years. So 6 years ago.
Wow. So you've been practicing law 11
years, yeah.
Wow. Man, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how do guys get a hold of you?
Well, I work at a firm, Gray & Becker. We've been around for over 35 years. We're a full-service law firm, and they just call me up, 512-469-0811.
All right. We'll do it. Thanks so much, man. This is awesome. There's so much good information in here, and I feel like we could talk so much more.
I'd be happy to come on the show again and talk about anything.
Yeah. Awesome. Great, man.
Thank
Cool
you.
Stuff. Let's wrap it.